Welcome back. Today you're getting just me, and this is an episode I promised y'all a while ago, and I'm just now getting around to doing it because I just went through a monitored cycle, and I really wanted to use this episode as me helping educate and just inform you on exactly what a monitored cycle is, all that we've learned through monitoring cycles, and then also a little update on our journey. So a monitored cycle is something that I wasn't very aware of until I saw a NAPRO doctor. Now, I know those of y'all that do IUI, you were probably aware of what a monitored cycle is. It also is called follicle monitoring, and I think there's another name for it too. But basically what it is you will have a transvaginal ultrasound. So going up your hoo-ha, and you're going to be monitoring your follicles up to ovulation. And here's the kicker. A lot of times doctors will monitor your follicles up to ovulation. So they are watching them grow. Normally you go in around like cycle day 10. Sometimes doctors want you to go in at the very beginning of your cycle, like cycle day 3, to get a look at all your follicles. So at the beginning, you're going to have a ton of little follicles. Then those are going to grow. Your body's going to find the dominant best follicle and really focus all its energy on growing that follicle. And then when ovulation happens, that follicle will release an egg, and then the follicle itself will then turn into the corpus luteum, and that will begin to produce progesterone. So what I used to think happened was your follicles had these eggs inside, they would burst, and then the follicle will just disappear. But the reality is that follicle then turns into the corpus luteum, creating progesterone. So they don't just like burst and disappear. They begin to like shrink down smaller, and then from there, they become the corpus luteum, and I think that's what it's called, the corpus luteum. I'm pretty sure. And they begin to produce progesterone. So what we saw with myself is back in, I think it was like 2021 when I had my very first cycle monitoring done. I was in Virginia. I was seeing a NAPRO doctor there. This is the NAPRO doctor that I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I have people from Virginia message me all the time, be like, hey, who did you see? And I'm like, I don't even want to give you her information. Or maybe I do, so you don't go to her. Because, I mean, it's not like she was horrible, but I kind of feel like we wasted so much time because she wasn't someone that was advocating for me or really like pushing for answers with me. And like I was doing all the research and bringing it to her. And anyways, it was very frustrating, especially when you're like newly figuring this all out and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So I did my very first follicle monitoring with her. And we looked on cycle day 3, and that's when we saw like all the little follicles. And then I came in cycle day 10, cycle day 12, cycle day 13, and cycle day 14. And I ovulated cycle day 14, I believe, because that was the last time I was in. And she was like, okay, you're about to ovulate, go home and, get to it. So she never had me come back, which is now something I wish I would have known, because it's super important to go back 24 to 48 hours after suspected ovulation to make sure your body is actually ovulating and something called LUFS, luteinizing unruptured follicle syndrome, isn't happening. On the podcast episode with Dr. Whitaker, the NAPRO doctor, a few weeks ago, we talked about LUFS. It's very frustrating. It's something I've dealt with. And the wild thing is I didn't even know I was dealing with it until we moved to Dallas in 2022. And my doctor here saw it for the first time, and I heard it for the first time. I had no idea, but there's so many cycles now that I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, we don't know how many cycles it's happened, because the only way to know with LUFS is through follicle monitoring, and you have to go back in after suspected ovulation. It's so important. If you do not go back in after suspected ovulation, you won't know. And oftentimes with LUFS, the follicle will just resolve itself. You still get your period on time. Your progesterone generally is around, the same numbers as it would be to confirm that you ovulated. It may be a little bit lower, but nothing that would think that you didn't ovulate. And, there are some people that say their progesterone is really low, 7 days past peak on their blood work. And then that's when they know LUFS happens. But for me, my blood work came back normal, not optimal for progesterone, but normal. So we never were like, oh my gosh, she didn't ovulate, right? Like we confirmed, like my blood work was confirming I was ovulating, even though we were seeing on the screen, the ultrasound, that my body actually wasn't ovulating. My temperature still does all the temperature things it needs to do. I still get fertile cervical mucus. I still get an LH rise, like you name it. Anything you could ask to be able to know if your body is successfully ovulating from the outside of what we can test, my body shows positives for that it is ovulating. The only way we've been able to know is through follicle monitoring and going back in 24 to 48 hours after ovulation and making sure my body actually released that egg. So this can be super frustrating. And I know it is for me because cycles that, we haven't monitored, I always sit there and wonder, like, is my body even ovulating? Have I been out this whole cycle and we don't know? Like, am I having false hope for myself? And I mean, there were a lot of cycles this month that we weren't when doing the herbs, we weren't supposed to be trying because you really want your body to help work with the herbs. So for those 2.5 months, it ended up being 3 cycles for the amount of time. We weren't trying. And the months before that, we didn't do January. My body was recovering from my December laparoscopic surgery. February, we did Clomid, but no monitoring. March, did Clomid again, went in for monitoring. February, we didn't do monitoring because my doctor was on maternity leave. So March, when we went in, we saw that not only did LUFS happen in February because I had a huge leftover follicle, which normally they resolve themselves, but sometimes they don't. But that cycle, it happened as well. So it disrupted that cycle. And then that's when we took a break for April, May, June, and then July we tried and we did monitoring and my body did not ovulate. August we tried but didn't do monitoring because we were out of town. September we didn't try because this is when we were going to Greece and I was going to be in my 2-week wait, my luteal phase, and getting those intrauterine antibiotic washes done. So you don't want anything going up you in your uterus, obviously, when implantation is trying to happen. So we didn't try in September. And then here we are October, my body was definitely healing from the intrauterine antibiotic washes. I felt very rushed and almost stressed to go in and do monitoring. So after talking with my doctor, talking with the doctors in Greece, talking with the Dr. Yi with Get Project Life Herbs, they're like, why don't you just let your body do its thing this cycle? And then next cycle come in for monitoring. They're like, if monitoring is going to add more stress to your plate, don't do it. That was for that particular cycle. So it was going to add more stress because we had so much going on and I was so exhausted from traveling so much. So we didn't do monitoring in that October, end of September, early October cycle. And then here we are back at it again. The cool thing is, though, when we were in Greece, no medications, nothing going on, and taking all those months to really help heal my body, a more holistic approach with the herbs, with food, exercise, proper nutrition, avoiding my food sensitivities, really working on my gut health, all these things, stress management, enough sleep, all these things. We saw that my body actually did ovulate in September because when we were in Greece in my luteal phase, he was able to look at the follicle and be like, oh yeah, that shows that you did ovulate. So that was super exciting to see. So this cycle, we added in monitoring, of course. Then we did Clomid. I did Clomid cycle day 3, 4, and 5. So just 3 days of it. And then I did Neupogen it was 14 hours before I triggered. You really want Neupogen in you for 24 hours before it triggered. It just helps prime those follicles to help them release the egg. But we didn't have enough time for that. So my doctor was like, let's just do it 14 hours before and let's go from there. So I did it at 4 p.m. and then we triggered at 7 a.m. the next day, and we did Lupron for my trigger. So Lupron is something new that I've heard about Lupron as to help suppress your endometriosis. It basically like will put your body in menopause, which is super interesting. And so that will help suppress your endometriosis and all your symptoms that go along with it. So some IVF doctors will have their endo patients go on Lupron for like 3 months before a IVF cycle to help suppress those endometriosis symptoms. Well, Lupron can also be used for those of us that deal with LUFS, luteinizing ruptured follicle syndrome, and it can be used as a trigger. So after talking to Dr. Whitaker about it, and I was hearing more and more from other people as I was talking on social media about it, and people were like, you should try Lupron. It's supposed to really help with LUFS for endo patients. So I brought it to my doctor, and she was like, I've never done it with a patient, but I'm more than willing to do it with you, and we can see if it works. Because here's the thing. Earlier this year and last year, I had tried Clomid in a trigger shot and my body still didn't ovulate. I've tried letrozole in a trigger shot and my body didn't ovulate. HCG as the trigger shot, and then Overdrill as well as triggers. I've done multiple triggers in the past with medication like letrozole, Clomid, Femara, and tamoxifen, and my body still didn't ovulate those cycles. And one time it actually created a cyst that ended up bursting, and that was so insanely painful. That was like 2 years ago. That was so painful. So all that being said, like this time last week, we were trying to figure out if I should do HCG as a trigger or do Lupron as a trigger, and ultimately decided let's go with the Lupron. Let's just try it. We've tried HCG, didn't work. The new thing was Neupogen in this, right? Which was exciting, but we ended up going with the Lupron, and my body ovulated, which was so exciting to see. So exciting to see. So not only did my body ovulate fully naturally on its own in September, that September cycle, it ovulated again here with these medications, and also obviously all the healing we've done as well. So I don't know if my body ovulated last cycle because we didn't do monitoring, so we don't know. But it's just really exciting to be able to see, like walk into an appointment. Someone messaged me because obviously I was sharing all of this on social media, and someone messaged me and she was like, can I just say I've been following you for like 3 years, and it is so incredible to see you get in your car and share this good news and not be crying and having to share bad news. And I was like, oh my, it's so true. Like I feel like all these doctor visits when we've been doing monitoring, even though it hasn't been that many, the few we've done this year, it's been bad news, bad news, bad news. Like body didn't ovulate. LUFS happened again. Even last year, it was bad news, bad news, bad news. Body didn't ovulate. LUFS happened. So to be able to we are taking this as such a huge win. And Steven said it best. Like this cycle, we actually have a chance. We have a chance because when LUFS happens, you cannot get pregnant. Your body did not release an egg. You did not ovulate. So you're out before even entering your 2-week wait, which is, as much as the 2-week wait sucks, at least you have like a sense of hope and a little bit of excitement and being like, oh my gosh, and you don't have to wait a whole month before trying again. I feel like the cycles where you ovulate, you're hopeful, you're excited, and then if it doesn't happen, okay, you have 2 weeks before you get to try again. Well, with LUFS, you're waiting a whole month, and it feels like forever. And it was just so cool to see that in writing, see someone be like, it's so exciting to see you happy coming out of a doctor's visit and getting good news. And I was like, gosh, it really is. And I feel like we have just been getting such good news ever since going to Greece and just hearing from those doctors. And here we are, my body ovulated. It's exciting. And no matter what happens this cycle, we are taking this as a huge win. They say with a perfectly healthy husband and wife, man and woman, you have a 20% chance every single cycle. So that's going to lead me into our conversation around adoption. And as we get nearer to that decision of a timeline, Stephen and I will sit down and really talk about it all. And of course, if that is something we begin to pursue next year. We will be sharing everything we're learning, of course. I think the first steps, well, we've been doing this for the past year and a half, but really helping heal our minds and bodies with the trauma of infertility and miscarriage, and making sure that, adoption is not a Band-Aid for those of us that are going through infertility. It's not like well, we don't know what else to do, so here we are. That's never ever how we've looked at it, and that's never ever how we've processed it. Adoption is something I've always wanted to do, and I know it's 100% something we will do in our life. I always just say it's something that we're really thinking about doing a lot sooner than we thought, because we honestly thought okay, we'll do adoption. Steven was super interested in foster care, but he was maybe we'll do that when our kids are grown. And now it's well, maybe it's something God's calling us to do sooner rather than later. We're praying about it. We've been praying about it. We feel called to adopt. Timeline, we're just not sure yet. We do want to give my body an ample amount of tries. So if you have a 20% chance every cycle, that would be 5 tries. So I think we've decided we're definitely going to try for 4, maybe 5 more cycles. So that will bring us to February or March before kind of closing the chapter on all the interventions for our infertility journey and moving forward with the adoption process. In the state of Texas, you can't be pursuing fertility treatment while you adopt. So that's kind of why I say closing the book on interventions. And we've kind of gotten to a point where we don't really know what else to try here. Obviously we're in a place that's really exciting right now where it's okay, we tried these things. Here we are. My body ovulated. Let's hope this keeps going and we'll go from there. But something, if you are going through infertility, you don't know what's going on, I highly, highly suggest have you find a doctor that will do follicle monitoring and make sure they go back in 24 to 40 hours after suspected ovulation to see if you ovulated. So if you went in, let's say your doctor's office is closed on the weekend. If you went in Friday and you think your body ovulated, you can wait till Monday to go back in, but just make sure you go in Monday to check to make sure that body actually ovulated and that follicle is not continuing to grow. And that's something I said when I was videoing. I always video my doctor's appointments when Steven can't come because I want him to be able to see it. And also it's nice for me because I get to rewatch it when I'm not in the emotional state and heat of the moment. So I get to go back and watch it, and also using it, sometimes I use it for social media purposes as well. And it was the moment she went over to my right ovary and we saw the follicles and they were smaller. I was oh my gosh, they're small. They're not huge. It was such a relief because when LUFS happens, my follicles get so big. Right after ovulation, they're just continuing to grow. And it's it's so frustrating when we see that. And that's what I'm used to seeing. So seeing them smaller. Also, this cycle, we did have 2 dominant follicles. Well, what we think was 2 dominant, we're not 100% sure, because one of them on Thursday was measuring 19 millimeters. The other one was measuring barely 15 millimeters. And they say 15 millimeters is the lowest you want to be considered a dominant follicle. And since I didn't go back in Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, we didn't track that smaller follicle to see if it continued to grow or if my body just focused on the larger follicle and considered that the only dominant one. And then when we went in Monday, we saw that both the follicles had shrunk. The smaller one was at 13 millimeters, and I can't remember what the bigger one was at, but it had shrunk quite a bit too. So we know that LUFS didn't happen to either of them. We definitely know ovulation happened with the biggest follicle. Again, we don't know about the smaller follicle just because we weren't there to monitor and look at it all, which is totally okay. And yeah, so that's kind of where we are. I find doing monitored cycles so informative. You learn so much about your body. You get to learn how thick your uterine lining is. You'll be able to see your cervix opening and shutting, aka your fertile window. You'll begin to see your uterus become progesteronized after ovulation, and you can see like it's so interesting. You'll be able to see your uterus become estrogenized as well when your body's leading up to ovulation. You just learn so much about your body. And it's also given me a lot of peace of mind because I was diagnosed with low AMH like at the very beginning of our journey. My AMH came back pretty low. I think it was like a 1.8 when I was like 26 years old or something. And, there's a lot of AMH is kind of confusing out there. And I stressed about it for a long time and let it kind of like, be very frustrating and depressive for me. But the reality is just with a low AMH, that doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. And all you need is one follicle. And by doing monitoring, you get to see your follicles. And what's really cool is after my endometriosis excision surgery, we were able to see, like before that, I had like barely any follicles on like cycle day 3. And sometimes even at the height of ovulation, I wouldn't even have one dominant follicle. But after my endometriosis excision surgery, like we saw so many follicles populate, and, being able to see 2 follicles this cycle that could be dominant, like that's insane to me, like insane, because I was told with that low AMH by a doctor, which I wish this doctor never even told me this, that, there's a possibility you won't ever be able to get pregnant with this low AMH. That's not true. That's not true. And this is what I've loved through advocating for myself and seeing my body on screen and being able to work with my body. It's like, oh, this is the reality. Like you only need one follicle. And then being able to see your body improve with different things, like, even with inflammation, that's something I've really struggled with. Obviously, endometriosis is an inflammatory disease, but, endometriosis, eating my food sensitivities, toxins in this world that we live in, like all these things cause so much inflammation in your body. And as I began to get rid of those food sensitivities, eat for my fertility, get rid of toxic products that I use every single day around my house, on my face, on my skin, and then also having that excision surgery, we've seen my body we've measured my CRP levels, which are my inflammation levels. We've seen them drastically decrease. We're able to see with my follicles and like even the inflammation around them. Like this last cycle, she was just like, oh my gosh, like look how great your inflammation looks. Like it looks incredible, because I was on low dose naltrexone last year for my inflammation. And I actually brought it up to her at my Monday appointment. And I was like, do you think I need to get back on, or last Thursday appointment, like back on low dose naltrexone? And she was like, why would you? Like your inflammation looks incredible. So again, goes hand in hand with everything I'm doing at home too. Like that really shows the holistic work that I've done has really helped those inflammation levels, and obviously surgery. So it's exciting. We're excited to see what's next. We're taking this as a huge win. I feel like earlier this year when we took a step back and began to heal more holistically, it was very defeating because we hit the 3-year mark. We were going on year 4, and it was just like frustrating and exhausting. And it was like, I really have to wait more. Like, I feel like infertility is hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. And I was just so sick of waiting. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that, because now we're seeing the positive effects. So maybe you're on the fence of, I don't know what to do. Maybe I want to, maybe I should take a more holistic route, or maybe I should take a break, or whatever it may be. Maybe let this be your sign of do that, because your body's going to come back so much stronger and healthier to tackle the next cycle that you're going to try on. I mean, that's mentally, emotionally, physically, all the above. So sister, you're not alone. We are in this together. I highly encourage you I think everyone trying to conceive should do a monitored cycle, because you just learn so much about your body. It's so interesting. Like if you were to ask me 3.5 years ago, if I knew I didn't even know what ovulation was 3.5 years ago. Okay. That's how far we've come. Now I'm sitting here talking about your uterus being estrogenized and progesteronized. Like what? Didn't even know what this stuff was. So it's so cool. And the more you learn, the more you know. Knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is so much power. being able to take what you learn to your doctor and go from there. I'm all for Eastern and Western medicine. I know that's not for everyone. I am a little bit more of a crunchy girl, I guess you could say, but I would not consider myself full send crunch at all. But like, I like Botox, but I also clean with like Branch Basics and don't have bleach in my house or anything like that. And, I like organic food, but also like I'll eat a cheeseburger every now and then, like it is what it is. So I'm not full crunch, but I totally believe that Eastern and Western medicine both have a place in our infertility journeys. And I think there's just not enough research, not enough knowledge around infertility to only trust one or the other. And I'm just here to tell you to advocate for yourself. Keep learning, keep advocating for yourself, do what feels good for you. And I really want to emphasize this. I said this the other day on my Instagram stories, and I think it needs a permanent place because this is so important. I never want you to listen to a podcast, watch a story, watch a TikTok or a reel of mine and begin to compare yourself to me or begin to feel guilty about what you're doing versus what I'm doing. Whatever you're doing, you have made that decision. That is your decision that you have made. That is so important. And only you and your significant other can make that decision of how you're going to grow your family. Anyone else is white noise. I think it's super important to learn from other people and get inspired by other people, but I never want you to compare yourself or feel guilty that you're not doing something. Like maybe you're someone who wants to jump into IVF or jump right into IUI. Amazing. Do what feels good for you. I'm here to support you and cheer you on. Maybe you're someone who wants to do things more holistically. Maybe you want to get to the root of what's going on. Amazing. I'm here to root you on and cheer for you. Okay. But do what's best for you. I know there is so much unsolicited advice in this world. I know there's so many people that have opinions of what you should and shouldn't do. Trust yourself. And that's something that I'm so proud of Steven and I. We've come so far of like, he's always been good at this, but like drowning out the noise, knowing what we're comfortable with, what we feel is good for us and right for us to do. And that's what we're going to do. And, you can have conversations with other people in a very respectful way of telling them, that, I'm not interested in doing that. This is what we're going to do. And I think that's the beauty in, trying to conceive, infertility. Like you get to make that decision. Like no one would tell a cancer patient what they should or shouldn't do. Okay. No one should be telling you walking through infertility what you should and shouldn't be doing. So trust your gut. I'm here to support you, here to cheer you on, advocate for yourself, sister, do what feels good for you. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And I highly recommend you bringing up to your doctor, doing a monitored cycle, and just make sure that they go back in and check 24 to 48 hours after that follicle releases that egg. And maybe do a few of them too, because the thing with me is we've seen on screen my body ovulate before, and then the next cycle my body won't ovulate and LUFS will happen. So maybe track a few of them if you think this could be your suspicion. All right, sister, thank you for being here. We will see you next time. And I hope you have the best day and week wherever you are ever. Bye.